colleagues, Prime Minister, representatives of the social partnership. This afternoon is the formal signing ceremony of the compact which we have been able to reach between the government of Barbados and the private sector. I want to begin by thanking the members of the private sector, as I did a couple of days ago, for their commitment towards making life a little bit easier for the people of this country. We are conscious of the challenge that the first compact presented to a number of players, but we're ever mindful of the fact that it is now a time at which all of us have, without exception, to dig a little deeper and try a little bit harder in order to make sure that we're able to achieve stability, or maintain rather stability, across the society. Prime Minister, I don't think that I need to make any long speech with respect to... a summary of what it is that you will... I had actually done that before. Other appointments. I had actually spoken to the press on this matter late last week, but let me just say again, to give you some context, we have maintained the full range of products with the exception of the eggs which were in the initial compact. Outside of that, all of the 47 items are continued in this new compact. As you will recall, the very first arrangement saw a restraint on markups voluntarily done by the private sector. And let me just re-emphasize this point about it being voluntary, because there is a misunderstanding and I think a misappreciation of the way in which the private sector has partnered with government in this matter. We have not chosen to legislate price controls. We have instead used the age-old social partnership in Barbados, which I maintain has been an excellent institution, in order to negotiate and to find common ground. As a result of that, the restrained markups of 12 to 15% seen across the board in the first compact have been adjusted now to 12 to 18% on dry goods and 12 to 20% on those requiring cold storage. Outside of that, as I said, all of the other items, with the exception of eggs, are continued to be within the compact. And as the media has already indicated, with regard to chicken, that is a matter which is being treated to by the poultry producers in Barbados on a case-by-case basis. I perhaps should also say that at no stage is there or has there been any failure to appreciate on the part of anybody the challenges which some of the smaller chicken producers would have faced in this country. It is for that reason that different types of interventions have been made by government during the course of the last year. And I say that specifically with reference to what I consider to be perhaps a little bit unfortunate type of commentary that was noted in the paper during the course of last week. I did not mean that to you personally, Colville. Yes, but it is, again, it has been, to be precise, $6 million in feed subsidies, which government has provided over the course of the last 24 months. And that is not, by any stretch of the imagination, a small thing. And if we have to look at it in different segments, you will remember that, again, the government intervened at the pump, the petrol pump. And again, freight cost money and fuel. And so therefore, it is an effort which has been made by government across the board. But that gives the context to where we are today. And I want once again to underscore my own personal appreciation for all the members of the private sector who remained with us and held strong within this compact in the interest of the wider good of the people of Barbados.
Good afternoon, colleagues, social partnership, our ministers of government and Prime Minister. Once again, we are very delighted to be here, for phase 2 of what we think was a fairly groundbreaking initiative in 2022. Right off the bat, I want to give my profound thanks to the President of the Barbados Chamber of Commerce and Industry, Mr. Anthony Branker, who you will hear from next, and his entire support, including Mr. Tomlinson Bino, his Executive Director, Mrs. Misha Mloban-Clark, for the yeoman work that they have done to bring us to this point in this juncture. Mr. Branker will no doubt get into more specificity in terms of some of the key differences between Phase 1 and Phase 2. But just let me say that we have to understand and do a much better job this time around of explaining to the public how the compact really works, what the compact is, and what the compact is not. As Senior Minister just outlined, it is an attempt to give some relief on what we have worked together to determine is a core basket of goods that is consumed by those in the more vulnerable economic class. It attempts to do so by limiting and significantly reducing the markup on those 47 items. So a lot of your favorite stuff, and if I were to use some of the products that were bandied about over the last 6 months, it does not include your favorite brand of ice cream. It does not include your favorite brand of caviar. It does not include any of those items. And I think there's an opportunity for us, and in collaboration with the Division of Commerce, to publish on their website the products that are subject to the compact, so there's pellucid clarity as to what is actually in that basket. There's also an opportunity this time around, I believe, to publish the retailers and distributors that are party to the compact, because one of the changes is that not everyone could have sustained a second leg of the journey. And you would have heard Mr. Bino explain in very, very clear terms last week the kind of hit it would have taken to some parties who understandably just could not go the distance again. And to those parties we say thank you for what they were able to do in the first 6 months. No doubt we would have seen all the headlines yesterday published by the Barbados Statistical Service, which would suggest that the prices in Barbados have risen, notwithstanding the compact. And when I saw that, I reached immediately for my central bank reports, which suggested that at least for July and August, there was a significant reduction in that same retail index. What has been unearthed to me is that when you disaggregate the impact of the products and the goods in the basket, the prices of vegetables, ironically enough, vegetables caused that significant U-turn shape of what was presented in yesterday's headlines. So whilst we want to come to the public and to show what that retail index has done in terms of movement, perhaps a broader context could have been given to the public where they understood that the entire compact was not necessarily at fault, but there are specific products in that movement that are heavily weighted. I think what I heard was a third of that basket of goods is weighted and influenced by produce. And therefore the opportunity is that we have to have a much more data-driven approach, even how we report to the public, so that they understand what they were able to save on and where the unique issues are, because then it gives us the opportunity to focus on that particular sector over the next 6 months to see what we can do and how we can collaborate on easing that pressure point. So I want to say thank you to all the Barbadians who understood what this compact did for them. If it did nothing for some, then they were not the target audience of this initiative. That's all I would say. But those persons who, on the eve of the expiration of the first compact, were asking for the compact not to discontinue, those are the persons that this compact was designed to benefit. So with those few words, I'm going to pass over to Mr. Branker, and I look forward to signing this compact with my partners. One last thing. We have labor, and I think this continues to be, I think, a very, very profound and important and progressive construct where the three parties can sit and agree in the best interest of Barbados' social and economic development, how we advance. I would like to call on my colleagues in labor, particularly to look at those entities that are going the distance for now 1 year, to moderate their expectations as to what can be done in any negotiations that those entities are party to. particularly for the entities that are now going 12 months with the impact of the compact. So with those few words, I want to thank you all for the opportunity.
Thank you very much. Prime Minister, Senior Minister, other ministers of government, ladies and gentlemen, members of the press. I sit here this afternoon at this table basically representing retailers, distributors, manufacturers who understood their social responsibility and committed to contributing to the stability of this land of ours. It was a difficult journey the last 6 months for most, if not all, of the persons in the compact. And the fact that we do have some persons not going for a second 6-month period does suggest that it was burdensome for some persons, more burdensome for some persons. But in fact, it still is a sacrifice. And I really want to commend and congratulate the members of the retail and distributive sector, the persons in the bakeries who are on board with us, because they clearly understood that we could not move from where we were between a markup of 12 to 15% and just end it like that, because the impact would have been too much for the Barbadian public. And so I think that we have to appreciate, and I want to reiterate this, it is not a price control. It is a markup on the cost of the goods that the retailers and distributors have agreed to. And therefore, as the environment around the world continues to fluctuate, prices will obviously fluctuate as well, but we have committed to holding our markups. And I can't reiterate that enough, because I know there are certain persons who try to suggest that we are somehow fixing our prices. That is not the case. There's one correction I must put out there, though, to what Minister Simmons would have said, and regrettably we do not have the biscuit factory on with us, the Wabisco. So regrettably, Minister Simmons, Wabisco has not agreed to be part of this compact, and therefore we have to mark that spot so the general public would understand that the Wabisco products that were a part of the compact for the last 6 months is no longer going to be a part of the compact going forward. That is regrettable, but each business has to assess their capability. So I just want to finally thank Senior Minister Simmons for the way that he led the negotiations, and Prime Minister Motley. This round of negotiations was robust, but at the same time, it was conducted in a manner that that what we were putting on the table was appreciated and understood, and therefore we are happy and pleased to be here today to be part of this signing activity. So I thank you.
Good afternoon, PM, Senior Minister, all other partners. Good afternoon, everyone. My comments are simple and short, but the Labour Movement endorses any initiative to offer any kind of relief to the members and the workers, and by extension, the public. All partners within this compact must be complimented for the efforts to maintain the partnership that we have established for the last year. Thank you.
Thank you, Prime Minister. Thanks to the other members of the table. Labour, as was announced by my colleague, is appreciative of any efforts being made to alleviate the pain and hardship that they're facing in today's economy. And we mark this occasion as a forward step in the right direction. We believe that this, however, would be looked at as a component of the work that is being done by the social partnership to bring further relief to the members and citizens of Barbados. It is a difficult one, and we must acknowledge that anybody that is making a reduction in its overall operations has to be recognized. So we will not say that it is not a major achievement. It is. but it is part of a section of the overall process. This is markups come at the end. There's a whole lot of things that come before markups, and I believe that everybody at this table is committed on working on those components that will then redound to even better benefits to the members out there. So it is not all that everybody will expect, and we need to put it out there. It is not everything that labor expects, but it is a step in the right direction in a continued process. And we are committed to working together to achieve as much as we can in the environment that we're in. So I'd like to thank all the members who signed on, and to Minister Kerry Simmons, who led the negotiations, and the union looks forward to continue working with the partnership. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dwayne. First of all, let me start by thanking all of the parties who are here for the work that was placed in it. Clearly, Senior Minister Simmons led on behalf of the government, along with Minister Cummins and their officials. On behalf of the private sector, Mr. Branca led on behalf of the private sector because of his position in the chamber, and then, of course, Labour is witnessing. But like with everything else, let us remember context. When we started this compact in July last year, it came on the heels, and as the Minister of Labour walks in as we speak, it came on the heels of extraordinary increases in freight and fuel, energy prices in particular. The government had already taken actions in the budget last year with respect to capping the rate at which the freight prices, at which prices would be calculated for the purposes of taxation. Had we not done that, there would have been an escalating set of prices on consumers. We had also capped the VAT, the price at which we would take the VAT from fuel prices on, and then we came to the point where we were also continuing to see, in spite of that cap, fuel prices continue to rise. In July last year, fuel prices were much more than they are now. Today, freight prices are less equally than they were when we started to take the actions that we were taking. So what we have is an environment that is moderating at the international level, recognizing, however, that there is still some pressure on us, and the efforts of the private sector to moderate their markups, even with some slight increase on some with respect to dry goods and cold goods, still places us in a better position than a lot of others, because we have agreed with the approach that has brought us safely thus far for the last 4.5 years. Share the burden, share the bounty when it comes again. And it is against that backdrop, therefore, that we do recognize that it is beyond their control to deal with prices that are being imported, but it is within their control to moderate the extent to which they may profit from them. We see all the stories globally with oil and gas companies making $200 billion in profit, and we all know why. By the same token, what we have taken a decision to do, and we've done it, and government has extended it with the VAT at 10% for electricity rates up to 250 kilowatt hours again, and we're extending it, we hope, until the 30th of September in the first instance again, to ensure that we can keep the pressure off of persons. But context means everything too, and we get it, because that's why ahead of time, the decisions that we had made to be able to reduce corporation taxes, the decisions that we had made to be able to reduce personal income taxes, all of you in front of me have benefited from it for the last 3-4 years. The decisions that we made to increase reverse tax credit and who could benefit from it. The decisions that we made to increase welfare rates by 40% and to also broaden the platform of rates that were then available to persons. All of this goes into the mix. But it is hard. And it is hard because we just happen to be living in a world that is significantly different from the world that we were living in at the beginning of this century. And regrettably, there are times in life,
and the Bible tells us the stories, history tells us the stories, that there are peaks and valleys. And regrettably, the world is going through a valley. The fact that countries across the world have had to use monetary policy, the use of interest rates, increasing interest rates to moderate cost of living, tells you that we do not walk this journey alone. But equally, we are not without capacity and power. And that is why we said from the beginning of this compact in July last year, this does not cover everything. It would be impractical for us to believe that it could. But it covers 47 basic items. Initially it was 49, I think. It covers 47 basic items that almost every Barbadian household will have to use. And there are those who may want to continue to have a range of cheeses or a range of different choices. We get that. But now is the time for us to deal with necessities as opposed to what we would like, what we want. And therefore the government is happy that we have been able to work constructively with the private sector and with the labor movement in order to be able to say to this country, brethren and sistren, look, we see still rough. It may not be as rough as it was last year, but it's still rough. And when you see rough, you don't swim freestyle. You may not, and for sure can't swim breaststroke and backstroke. You might get a dog paddle, or you might have to float and come in. We know it in our lives every day. How many times people have had to say to somebody else in the family who would like something, I hear you, I want to give it to you, I love you, bad, 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 bad. But at this point in time, I got the whole strain, and when I could get back there, you can get it. When you got 3 sons, so you know exactly what you're talking about. You understand? And all of us may know that you may even have had an intention to do X, but if something else happened to somebody in the family, what you got to do? Press pause and hold again. So this has not been an easy time to govern. You know, I keep remembering that former Prime Minister P.J. Patterson said to me 2 years ago when he called in the middle of COVID, and he said, my dear Mia, I don't envy anybody who is a leader in this world today, because difficult decisions are going to have to be made, because we are facing circumstances that the world has not faced for almost 100 years. So not even our parents know what it is to navigate this road. And in fairness to the heads of the private sector and the heads of the labor movement, none of their predecessors in the modern Barbados know what it is to walk this road. And therefore, for those who find it easy to comment from far, I would ask them to apply their hearts to common sense and to recognize that in life, effort must be recognized and rewarded where it takes place. Always, can we do better? Yes, we can always do better. But that is a process as well. Now, there's something in it for everybody, and I agree with Mrs. Tanis, who recognized that in the reporting of the matters yesterday, that it did not quite show the drop, and you can go and look, and I'll give you the graphs that show the drop that took place in July and August and September on food prices in October. Now you had a little bump again, but then we all know what the world has been going through in the last 2 months as well. So that, but we have capacity to overcome that area in which the problem came. The problem was with what? Was with what? And Colvin, you come from a country that has mastered the art of producing vegetables in almost every backyard, not to mention industrially. Not true? So that it is within our power as Barbadians to take that part of the food bill that we need to keep healthy, but that is within our capacity to grow from a half a bin to tires, to a little piece of ground if you got ground, and to grow. And as I keep the Minister of Agriculture, who is here, and I almost forgot you in there, I apologize, who has brought great effort to this work, will tell you that I keep talking to him about 6-week crops. and 12-week crops and 16-week crops. And you know why? I don't think there's anything more rewarding than a person planting something, tending to it. Charlie, your father with livestock. I can call out everybody, because all of us in here know what it is to grow crops and raise stock. But we need more, Sharon, you understand? We need more people to be doing it. Because if more people do it, what do we have? A barter economy, effectively. You got squash, I got cucumbers and tomatoes and lettuce. You understand? You got lamb, I got some chickens. And that's how our families lived before. And I'm only asking that even as government and the private sector and the labor movement try to do our best institutionally, that we ask Barbadians and Barbadian households to also step up to the plate and to make sure that on some things that may well be beyond our control, like feed prices, and we're trying to find other policy initiatives to deal with it, that we are in a position to moderate. Because the hardest thing when the sea is rough is to keep your head above water and to allow life to continue. There will be a time when you will get back and moving. And when I look at what is before us, as I said, in terms of the capital program that the government has, both on and off balance sheet, which you'll hear a lot of. Tomorrow the estimates will be laid. The process of unfolding the program of government over the next 4 weeks will take center stage, both in terms of its expenditure, its revenue, its macroeconomic and fiscal and financial policies, that we will understand that we are heading in the right direction, but we have not yet reached safe harbor. Things are looking better. The clouds are not as heavy as they were before, but we have not yet reached there. And if you try to let go your hand and to do everything as you are coming to shore before you get to shore, a riptide can still take you away. And people can drown sometimes in 6 inches of water, far less 6 foot of water. So I'm asking the country to bear some more. Bear with us. We are going to get there. We are better than we were, God knows, that we were last year, and certainly 2020 and 2021. But it is a process. All of us know that when we have an injury, as much as we want to get up out of the bed, you're a footballer, you're injured, you sprain your ankle, as much as you want to get up and move immediately, there's some things that you just have to allow the passage of time to help you with. And this situation with inflation globally is one of those things. We are seeing improvements. And you guys watch CNN, BBC, Al Jazeera, all of them. And you're seeing the improvements starting to come, but you're still seeing the adjustment upwards, even if in much smaller increments of interest rates, because while things are improving, we are not quite yet there. So I ask us to continue as a nation, do the things that we can do more and better. And if you didn't start growing a few things yet, start now. Similarly, I ask the private sector to continue to recognize that in the same way that government has seen the prices of other things come down, that where there is a decline in prices, let us ensure that we pass it on. But sometimes you have to also communicate with people when you do those things. And I ask the labor movement to recognize too that we will continue to try to work with you. But as Dr. Greenidge told us from last year, sometimes the chasing of prices in an inflationary environment is an impossible task. And therefore we do know, just as we had to bear some heavy weight and pain with the pandemic in 2020, we're still bearing some weight, but the weight now is liftable. So there are some issues that are very glaring, and we have to deal with that. And the government's approach, from its approach with income taxes and corporation taxes from day one, and initially the faith that we took initially with wage increase was to say we hear people's pain, we feel people's pain, hold tight, we can get a little something, a little breakfast, but we still have to keep on this long journey because we lost too much in the last decade for us just to believe that you can replace a decade of loss in a short space, especially with other things coming at you. Like if you're in a video game, you ever play a video game and everything coming at you, and you gotta work out which ones to fob off? That's how the world feels today. So let us sign and do this in the name of the people of this country for whom we stand responsible and for whom we invite to also play their part on this journey. Thank you. Sorry, Kerry, you were saying underneath, this underneath. Forgot. Here, look. This one? This one? Okay, we done. To close, let me say that there is nothing more humbling than being able to participate in a national exercise that binds all of us together. And that has been the beauty of this country that we have inherited, and that is the kind of country that we want to continue to manage and leave for our children and our children's children. What we are doing here, some may take for granted locally, but this is not the norm in the majority of countries of the world. And people are left to their own devices and to face the winds on their own. Mercifully, it is part of the Barbadian DNA to find common purpose, even if we can't agree on everything, but to find common purpose where we can, especially in difficult times, and to come together. Okay, so thank you for coming. Is there any questions before we go?
Just one or two questions from me, Madam PM. I don't know if anyone else does. If we may go back to the issue with the chicken farmers, while we don't know who are the persons, who are the players participating in the compact, there has been the issue raised that by the smaller farmers that they could be priced out of the market if larger players reduce their prices within the parameters of the compact. How would you respond to that concern?
I think all of us have agreed that we have tried to create room for all of the persons, small or large, but in particular the smaller farmers. We would not have been subsidizing feed in the past if it was only the larger players who could absorb some shocks. We've done it on behalf of all, and we are trying to make sure that there are other prices and other input costs that we can hold a line on where possible. You know, sometimes it is difficult, but you have to create an opportunity, and you can't, how to put it, you cannot seek to recover all of your profits from a domestic market as small as this. And Barbadians have to get accustomed to the notion that we're going to have to expand production for export in order to drive unit prices down. And therefore, we have been talking broadly, and Minister Cummings will tell you, as well as Senior Minister Simmons, that we have been talking broadly about trying to make sure that we are in a position to have more value-added product and have the capacity for exports. I suspect that once that begins to happen, it can be a game changer, in particular for the smaller poultry producers. But we cannot believe that we can continue to literally recover all of our costs and build our profits on a market as small as this. And even if we were to look at the rest of the Caribbean, Jamaicans love chicken backs. Trinidadians love chicken legs. Bajans love chicken wings, although we need to stop loving it because it's bad for you. And I'm serious about that. And chicken breasts, and young people love nuggets. We need to be able to find an opportunity out of all of this that will allow us to bring our unit prices down, particularly given that not every country can, in fact, do their own production. And I'm not talking about the region alone, I'm talking about other countries within oceanic reach. Okay? Any other questions?
Yes, Madam PM. Final question from me, and I want to thank you for stating at the beginning that I have the opportunity to put in a question outside the scope of this discussion.
I know that if I didn't let you do it, you're going to come and ask me on the side video.
Yeah.
So,
the issue was raised as it relates to the choice for governor of the central bank. The concern was raised that given that he was a key architect, for want of a better word, of the board program, he basically has been asked to monitor the success of his program by being now assigned as governor of the central bank. What would you say to those critics?
I know you know better. Because I know that you are one of the people who write enough stories in the nation, and that you can tell that person who made those comments that if he looked and asked who was on the bird monitoring committee, because there is a separate committee to monitor the bird. The lady to my right is a co-chair of the bird monitoring committee. And the notion, therefore, that it is the central bank who must now monitor bird, and hence there is a conflict of interest, is perhaps one of the more unfortunate comments I've heard from anybody seeking to lead in this country. If they do listening tours, then they need to listen a little better. And if they don't want to listen, they need to go and do their own research, and to perhaps go and look at Section 6 of the Central Bank Act, which makes it very, very clear what the role of the central bank is, and nowhere in there is it to monitor and to be an independent monitor for that committee. It is significant that the Bird Monitoring Committee is the private sector and labor monitoring government. But the central bank is at the core of helping to be responsible for this country's monetary policy, interest rates, etc., helping first and foremost to do what? You know the first thing the Act says? That the primary objective of the bank is to maintain the value of the currency, the exchange rate, the very thing that the Burt plan, first one, was set up to achieve, that we can maintain the value of the Barbados dollar. So to say that all of a sudden that a man appointed as governor of the central bank should not be there because it is a conflict of interest is to suggest that the person does not know what the interests are nor what the conflict is. And therefore that is most unfortunate. And I would just ask people to go and read, because if you read Section 6 of the Act, it is very clear what it is. And if you go and read your own stories, you don't say head of the Burt Monitoring Committee, Dr. Kevin Greenwich, head of the Burt Monitoring Committee, Dr. Cleviston Haynes. You said head of the Burt Monitoring Committee, Mrs. Tricia Tannis, and then the head of the representatives of Labour. So please, and I think that the stories that you've carried from others would suggest that there has been overwhelming support for the appointment of the central bank board, for which I simply concurred. And secondly, that An opposition doesn't have to oppose everything. And I just say that I know what it is to have been an opposition leader for almost a decade, minus 2 years, and you don't have to oppose everything. David Thompson didn't do it, I didn't do it, and I would suggest to the young gentleman that he not do it. Any other questions?
Madam Prime Minister, if you would permit me to ask a question of David. When this planet started early on, the chief spoke of the issue of the negotiations, which we all know on the table, and the chief said he will want to be publicly known. But in terms of her asking for some leniency in terms of the negotiations going forward, is the union really in a position to try to speak to that at this stage in terms of the workers and what they're getting out of the compact and the pressures they're under?
But are you being fair to that? Because if I was there, I would
I'm
tell
not
you that
being
you only
un-
argue a case once, and that's in court. And I only negotiate a matter behind closed doors.
Which
you're free to answer.
I preempted and said I understand they didn't want to discuss it public before, but they only can tell us what their workers are facing at this stage.
It's okay.
He's the private sector.
Well, in terms of negotiations and what the workers are facing, we continue to treat to negotiations in a varied approach. And the Executive Council and the senior members of the union will continue to consult internally, take the information that is available as we go into each round of negotiations. And that's the philosophy we are imposing. We're having constant discussions with our members, and we are taking each negotiation as it comes. So there's no overall position. We do recognize that from our conversations, obviously, that we have different degrees of impact throughout the country, and that factors into any form of conversation. I can't get into any details in terms of what is being done in any negotiation. That would not be fair, and recognize that we do represent a number of businesses very close to one another. We generally don't speak in negotiation terms in public forums. But I can tell you that as we go through, we are working with our different business partners to try to achieve as best as possible the win-win situations that we normally strive for.
Can you say when the next round of negotiations is?
Negotiations for whom? We are talking private, so there's a vast number of dates. If you're talking about public sector negotiations, at this time the Barbados Workers Union has no comment on public sector negotiations. In due course, the Office of the General Secretary or our PR department will make the appropriate statements. But at this point in time, I don't have a statement to make on public sector
Dwayne,
negotiations.
and I thank you for adhering to the commitment that we all gave, that we don't negotiate in public. Because if you want that, that's the surest way for the negotiations to fail and for us not to get where we need to get. And suffice it to say that negotiations have resumed and are ongoing. And I'll ask everyone to just respect that fact and to give the negotiators, I'm not part of the negotiations, but to give the negotiators the space to do what they have to do. And at the appropriate time, we report, okay? And to back up what he said, with private sector negotiations, same thing. That's company by company or sector by sector. So we're at that stage where we're trying to do right by everyone, but we also have to do right by Barbados first, which means making sure that negotiations can take place in a constructive way that does not admit of all kinds of commentary. Because when people are making commentary, the question is, do they have all of the facts before them in the same way? Just as they did with this compact. There are people who threw cold water on it before we even started it back. But I also know how and where some of them look and what they listen to and why they would want to throw cold water. So Barbados is a small place. Okay. Thank you very much, and I look forward to seeing some of you over the course of the next few weeks as we get in deep into the estimates debate, which is really the work of government. Thank you.